As an editor's note, we are choosing to leave most of the typing of our prompt, which you are seeing on the screen, as well as the generation process. We are choosing to leave both of these processes out of our actual video. And so most of this process will take place outside of the window of what you are watching in the videos. That means then that the videos may appear to be short. However, so we're choosing not to have you watch this process of the LLM generating the information as well as watching the interaction with the prompt. This will provide you with a more focused process and one that you can easily replicate, stop the video, and undertake yourself. So with that, thanks and enjoy the course. Hello and welcome. Now, like all chatbots, Anthropic recommends that you use chaining in order to improve the results that you're getting from a chatbot. And whether it is chain of thought or just chaining in general, all you're really doing with chaining is breaking down complex tasks into smaller, manageable subtasks. And basically, you are either working in multiple conversations or one conversation where you're not trying to do everything inside of one specific prompt or conversation, where you're not trying to get all of the information from one prompt. As is stated, you can have a single task goal, but you should also consider iterating, which is replying to your conversation with another question. For example, Anthropic recommends that instead of doing one prompt for content creation, that you consider breaking the process into research, outlining, drafting, editing, and formatting, where you would have at least 5 different prompts and 5 different interactions within a conversation about one topic. For example, in Anthropic's stated example, there's one prompt asking for a summary. There's another prompt asking for feedback on the summary. In a third prompt, that feedback is then taken in order to improve the summary. And so finding ways to improve your output basically means breaking up your prompting into more than one response or reply, and then iterating with the chatbot in order to get the results that you want. Now, as a review, Claude does a number of different things with your text, and it's a good idea to be familiar with these things from the Anthropic help screen. Okay, so for that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. Welcome back. We can start a conversation with Claude by uploading documents that we're going to use in a conversation. We can then ask Claude for a synthesis of this information. So we're going to prompt Claude and we're going to ask for a synthesis and summary of the information. Now, by constructing the prompt the way that we did, we first got the rationale. We actually got Claude to talk about the individual elements of each document. And now we have a narrative summary. What we're now going to do is we're going to use the rest of our documents in order to append this document. We're going to do that by chaining our response to this specific prompt. So we're going to ask for a synthesis and a summary. I'm going to ask Claude to append the information without leaving out any of the information that it did before. We're also going to ask it to think step by step through the entire process. So what we have now done is we have now created one long document with several iterations of documents into Claude. And we are now ready to move on to the next step. Okay, so that thanks, and I will see you in another video. Welcome back. We're going to copy our entire document into our favorite word processing software or a notepad file. What we're going to do now with our document is we're going to upload it to Claude, and we're going to ask for feedback for this document in order to teach the subject. So we're going to include a role, and we're going to ask for Claude to criticize the summary that we have given it. We're now going to click Enter. We're now going to allow Claude to provide its criticism of this document. We're now going to take this criticism, and we're going to ask for an improved document. And what we now have is based on the role that we've asked Claude to play, is that we now have a set of criticisms that we can use to improve the document. So what we're going to do now is we're going to click Copy, We're going to add these criticisms into another document. And we're now going to move on to the next step where we use these criticisms in order to improve our document. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. Welcome back. We're now going to take the criticisms that we have of the document that we have created and synthesized, and we're going to improve it based on the criticisms given to us by Claude. We're going to upload both of our documents back to Claude. So what we're now going to do is take the criticisms that Claude has given us, and we're going to ask for an improved document based on a role, and we're going to ask Claude to walk us through its rationale by asking the chatbot to think step by step. So what we now have is we have a document that we've asked Claude to improve based on a specific role that we have intent for in terms of the audience for the document. We can now go to the next step. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. Welcome back. We can append our summary with scientific information if we can find it inside of Google Scholar. So if we look for articles according to our subject and we find an article, we can use it in order to assist us in writing our content. Once we get results based on our keywords, we can sort for the most recent information. We can then look for articles instead of any kind of content, and typically articles will be the easiest for us to get the information for and to summarize. Now, some of the information is going to be behind an academic paywall. However, some information is going to be freely available. When you find an article that you want, you can click on it and then download it to your hard drive. Now, the first thing that we can do with our information that we have downloaded is we can ask Claude if it is truly relevant to the information that we have. And so to do that, we're going to upload the document to Claude inside of this conversation. So in this particular case, what we have done is we have uploaded the document that we found on Google Scholar. We've asked the chatbot to think step by step through the process of helping us to determine if the information in it is relevant. And we've also given it an out. We've said to it that it's okay to say no, it's not relevant. And that's one practice that we want to undertake. We can now click enter. Now in this case, even though we have found a study, Claude has determined, based on the out that we have given it, that it will not add anything to our document. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. Welcome back. We now have an improved document. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by uploading the final improvement to Claude here in this conversation. And we are going to ask Claude to add some illustrations. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask Claude for at least 2 illustrations, one for each half of the document. And we're going to ask for them in the form of an SVG file. And so now that we have the document, what we're going to do is we're going to ask Claude to create images for each part of the document. Now in this case, what we've done is we've divided the document in half. And we've asked Claude to give us some kind of SVG image that will allow us to explain the content better. And actually what we're going to do is we're going to ask for a relevant image for each section. We're going to ask that the chatbot, for this case, would not create a flowchart for that image and would not create a mind map. Now that we have done that, we are now going to click enter. And our query was not exactly correct. So we're going to iterate with the chatbot and we're going to request that each statement be converted to an SVG file. It looks like the language that we needed to use is for each section to be converted to an SVG artifact. So that is actually what Claude is now going to do, is it's going to convert each of our section statements into an SVG artifact. We actually did have to engage the chatbot again in order to get it to complete the process. So Claude is now giving us an SVG for each section of our document. So what we now have is we now have an SVG in order to illustrate each element for our document. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. Welcome back. Now we have a number of choices we can make in terms of visualizing our data. For example, we can create charts, diagrams, maps, infographics. We can specialize visualizations. For example, we can do a specialized visualization like a word cloud. We can do a 3D visualization, interactive visualization, statistical, and scientific and technical visualization. That may be a good idea to take a list like this or a document like this and then to ask Claude which of these visualizations will fit our entire set of data. Now, what we have already done is we have created illustrations. Now, what we want to do is we want to further build out our content by determining which of these visualizations are going to fit our data. Now, the list that we generated is a list that we generated in a separate conversation with Claude to determine the comprehensive set of visualizations we can do with Claude. So we can take the entire set of visualizations and we can ask Claude all of the visualization types, which of these visualizations would be best in order for us to visualize our data. So we place our data, the final summary document, side by side with the data visualizations to determine which of those visualizations would be best to create in order to illustrate them properly. And Claude will give us a priority list. And so we can take that priority list and we can begin to create the visualizations that we feel are most appropriate for our data. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. Welcome back. Working from our priority list, we can turn our data into an infographic. So what we would do is we would go to our upload area and we would upload our data. Now it's likely that Claude would already know that we're talking about the information from this conversation. However, we're going to go ahead and upload the document anyway. What we're also going to do is we're going to make sure that we specify that what we want is an artifact. And so once we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to click enter. And we're going to allow Claude to now turn our document into an infographic artifact. Now, initially, what Claude says, it doesn't know how to do this. However, here in our right-hand menu, that is exactly what Claude has done, is it has created an infographic for us. So basically, what we have now done is we now have an infographic in order for us to use to further illustrate our content. It's a good idea now to go ahead and publish our document. And we're going to publish our document so that we can come back to it at another stage and iterate with it. So we now have a new document. We can come back and improve it. And it's all based on the content that we have been creating. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. Welcome back. We can use a bar chart to visualize our data. And so basically, we can copy the information from Claude from our conversation. And we can head into our conversation. What we're going to do is we're going to ask Claude to create a bar chart from our data. We're going to use the logic that Claude gave us. And what we're now going to do is we're also going to include that we want Claude to think step by step. And we're going to re-upload our data. Once we do that, we'll then click enter. And Claude will go through its process. And basically, we have the rationale as to why Claude created it the way that it did. And then we also have the visualization here on the right side. It may not be exactly the way you want. And so one of the things that you can do is you can publish the document. And by publishing, we will then have a document that we can come back to and iterate with in order to make it appear the way that we want. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. As an operational note, you'll notice that at each stage of the creation process, when we are creating different artifacts, we are re-uploading the final summary to give Claude over and over again. You may have seen it at the bar chart level. You may have seen it again at the infographic level, and you will see it again at several stages in this process. Now, Claude has a robust window of memory in terms of its conversation. However, it's a good idea to continue to remind Claude exactly of the data that we are asking it to visualize in order to reduce the possibility that this large language model will forget the elements of the conversation. And so this is a reason that why we captured the summary in the form of a document, and while we keep uploading the document to the actual conversation, instead of relying on Claude to remember earlier in the conversation to visualize the document. It is not a mandatory practice. However, it is one that will minimize confusion for the LLM. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. Welcome back. We're going to skip creating a pie chart. However, we are going to create a mind map. And so we're going to take the rationale from Claude and we're going to request that Claude create an artifact in the form of a mind map of our data. And we are going to upload our data. And it is our same final summary document. We are now going to click enter. And first, Claude will go through the logic process, and then it will go through the process of creating our data. And so basically, what we are doing is we're asking Claude to put together a mind map in a specific format. Now, once again, the mind map may not look the way you want it to look. And so it's a good idea that you first publish the document so you can come back and iterate with this specific element if it doesn't look the way you want it to look. And in fact, what we are going to do is we're going to copy the link and we're going to undertake this process in the next video. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in the next video. Welcome back. Now, by placing the link for our mind map while we are logged into Claude into our browser, we're going to get this element where we can click this button that says Remix Artifact. What that's going to do is that's going to place the artifact into a conversation with us in order for us to iterate with this specific element. Now, in most cases, when you place the element inside of Claude, Claude will suggest elements in order to improve the document. Now, you may already have elements in what you want the artifact to be. And for the sake of this video, we're going to take two of Claude's suggestions. And as a practice, we're going to ask Claude to think step by step. This will give us clues on why and how Claude makes the choices that it does. And Claude will first start with its rationale, which it has given us. It will now undertake the process of redoing our artifact. And so what you now see is you now see a different element that we have here that is clickable, and we can use it as is. Now, one of the things we can do in order to iterate with this particular element is we can go back now and we can get the third element. So whether we have an improvement or we want to use the improvements from Claude, we can iterate with this element. And Claude will undertake the remix and to continue to improve our artifact. And what you'll see here is now that Claude has undertaken its suggestion. And you can continue to iterate in this conversation about this artifact. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. Welcome back. You should be able to go inside of your individual conversations to see all of the artifacts that have been created. Now, all of the artifacts have been labeled, and those that have been labeled as code can be converted into an element that can be published on the web. For example, we can click on any element, and this element can be turned into an HTML file to be published on the web. So in this case, we're going to request that we have our infographic turned into a publishable web document. So we are going to give Claude a very simple prompt. So what we can now do is we can download our file. And to make sure that it looks the way we want, we can open it onto our personal computer and we'll have the file that we want. So basically what we can now do is we can take this file and we can upload it to our server in order to have it on the web. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. Welcome back. Now, if you use a WordPress website, what you can do is you can go to the code area. You can copy the entire code and take it to your WordPress website. Once you have the code, you can open a custom HTML area. You can put the code into your WordPress website. You can then preview the information inside of your WordPress website and you'll see your infographic. And if it looks the way you want, you can then finalize your post. So in this case, we're going to click Save Draft. Once we have saved the draft, we are then going to publish the post. And to finalize, we're going to click Publish. And our page is now ready. We can click this button to view our page. And your infographic will then be published on the web on your WordPress website. So you can take any of your artifacts that you have the HTML for, you can copy the HTML code, and if you can place them inside of your custom HTML block, you can publish them on your site. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. Welcome back. Now, as of the recording of this video, Claude does not have the ability to directly produce video and or audio. However, what we can do is we can create a script in order to place in the kind of artificial intelligence that can create video or audio. So what we can do inside of Claude is we can take our same summary and we can ask for that summary to be turned into a narrative for us to place inside of an artificial intelligence. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask Claude to create a script that we're going to place inside of an AI audio reader. And what we want is for Claude to describe what the individual is seeing on the web page so that when the audio is playing, the individual will associate what's playing in the audio with what they're seeing on the screen. We are now going to click enter. Claude is going to undertake the process. So what we now have is we now have the narrative for us to place inside of an audio AI or a video AI in order to be read to explain our artifact that individuals are going to be seeing on the web. And so you can undertake this with any part of the process. You can allow Claude to write a video script for you that you can either narrate yourself or you can have an artificial intelligence to narrate your script. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. Hello, welcome. Claude does have an API portal, and there are several elements in this portal where you can connect different applications to Claude, as well as to test different elements. When you first arrive to the landing page, you're going to notice that Claude allows you to claim $5 in free credit. Now, one thing you want to note about this is that this does not always work. As of the recording of this video, there are a number of individuals when they reach this stage that will be unable to verify their phone, and there is no fix, nor does support seek to remedy the issue. And it could mean that you may get a message saying that your phone number is already in use. And again, as of the recording of this video, there is no fix for this problem inside of Claude. If you have a phone number connected to your account, again, as of the recording of this video, there's no way to change the number associated with your account. And if you receive a message stating that your phone number is already in use, what Claude says is you will have to use a different phone number. So it's quite possible that you may arrive at this page wanting to test out the module. However, you will not be able to claim the free credit. That means then in order to go forward with this part of the process, it will require that you go forward to set up an account. Now, in order to sign up, you will be asked questions by your wizard. You'll then need to click continue. So we have now set up a paid plan, which is pay as you go, in order to demonstrate the process of understanding the API. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. Welcome back. Now you're going to see several elements on the dashboard inside the API console. And typically you're going to see the first level that says start prompting with Claude. However, one of the best places to start is going to be generate a prompt. And what you can do here is you can get Claude to help you generate specific prompts. And what you want to do here is you want to describe what it is you are trying to do. So what we have here is we have what it is that we want. And so what we can do here is we can click generate prompt. And what Claude will do is Claude will go through the process of generating a prompt that we can use inside of Claude. And basically, one of the things that you'll learn is how to structure prompts. And so you're going to see a fairly detailed method of creating the prompt that you want, which not only can you use inside of Claude, but you can also use as a pattern for other prompts that you want to create. What we can then do is click continue, and we can begin to edit the prompt inside of the workbench. You want to make sure to give your prompt a title. You can then begin to use some of the other elements inside of the workbench for this specific prompt. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. Welcome back. Now, what you're going to notice inside of the workbench is that you can choose how you're going to interact with Claude. You can click on the model settings, and what you'll notice is that there are several models that you can interact with in order to undertake this process. And you'll want to choose the model that is most appropriate for what it is that you are trying to do. You can also choose the temperature of Claude. When you're looking at the model temperature, you're talking about the amount of randomness. So if you have temperature of 0, that means there's very little randomness, and Claude is going to be very focused on giving you exactly what you want. If you want more randomness or more creativity, you can move this slider here in this area. And max tokens to sample, you can leave the default setting unless you have a specific reason to raise it or lower it. In general, the very top model will be the one that will be the most recent. However, you can look at the date in order to tell which model is the most recent. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. Welcome back. Now, because this area is made primarily for coding, you may see quite a few things that you may not be familiar with if you are not directly tied to computer code. For example, if we click the Run button, you're going to notice here that before Claude wants to run the model, it wants us to fill in example values. And of course, your interaction may be different when you begin to run things here inside of the workbench when you're testing out your prompts. One alternative is to take a screenshot of the page and then to go to Claude and ask Claude to explain what it is that you need to do. In iterating with Claude based on this element, Claude suggests different language for the prompt. So what we can do is we can copy what Claude stated and we can head back to our workbench. And so we have now added Claude's suggestions and we can now click Run. And we can await and test the prompt that Claude has given us. And it's at this point that you'll be able to determine if the prompt is generating the kind of information that you want. And if so, what you can do is you can make changes to the prompt until it is giving you what you want. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I will see you in another video. In conclusion, you will want to keep track of your usage when you are using the console and the workbench. To do that, you can go to your settings area. What you can then do is to go to the usage tab. You'll be able to see how many tokens you have used, and you'll be able to see how much that usage has cost you in terms of your allotment. And so depending on how you're going to be using the workbench, this is where you're going to want to track what it is that you are paying out every time that you use the system outside of Claude AI. Okay, so that thanks, and I'll see you either in another video or in another course. Welcome back. Now, it's important to note that payments that you make to Anthropic through the API are going to be different from the payment that you may be making to have access to the Claude AI chatbot. If you have paid for the Claude AI chatbot, you may approach certain projects in a different way. If we were to go and start a project, you're going to start the process by clicking Create Project. You're going to give your project a name. You can then click Create Project. That's going to bring you to the project creation interface. Now, one of the things you're going to notice is that you can set your custom instructions. If you're going to have a role or standard system information, this is a good place for you to write that information in. Once you write in your custom instructions, you can save the instructions. And what you'll notice is that you can add a knowledge. Now, knowledge will be the information that Claude will use in order to structure its answers to you. So where you may have uploaded content to the chatbot in a conversation, in this case, we can make it so that Claude will always interact with that content. To do that, you're going to go to the Add Content area. You can upload the content from your device. And in this case, instead of uploading 5 documents at a time, we're going to upload all of our content here in this area. And one of the things you'll notice is that we can still add more content if we want that content to be relevant to Claude's answers. And so once you have your information inside of the product knowledge, you can then structure a prompt based on the custom instructions and that knowledge. Once you have it, you can then click Enter, and you'll see Claude interact. And what's happening in the background is that Claude is interacting based on the information that you have uploaded. Now, projects are only part of the Pro plan. And as of the recording of this video, this really is the only feature over and above faster models that Claude is offering as part of the Pro plan. However, the workflow in the Pro plan allows you to deliver a more helpful result in a faster way. Okay, so with that, thanks, and I'll see you either in another video or in another course.
We hope you enjoyed today's masterclass. Explore Crespo AI for over 30 business tools, all in one dashboard.